The opinions and views expressed on this program do not reflect those of the management or staff of Community Media of Staten Island.
Hello and welcome to RUMC Vital Signs. I'm Alex Lutz. On our show, you'll meet the fantastic people who make Richmond University Medical Center thrive. RUMC is an award-winning full-service hospital located right here on Staten Island at 355 Bard Avenue. To learn more about the full array of services provided at RUMC, visit rumcsi.org. The focus of our show today is an autoimmune disease that affects 1 in 100 people worldwide, but only about 30% of the population is properly diagnosed. I'm referring to celiac disease, which if left untreated, can lead to additional serious health problems. Joining me for today's discussion on celiac disease is board-certified gastroenterologist Vahe Shahnazarian. In addition to Dr. Shahnazarian's credentials, which you see on the screen, he's been published numerous times in world-renowned medical journals and is often requested as a speaker at national conferences around the country. Dr. Shahnazarian currently sees patients at one of 2 locations on Staten Island, where he has offices as a member of Richmond University Medical Center's Richmond Health Network. You've been on our show before, so welcome back, Dr. Shahnazarian.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I guess the best place to start is tell everybody what exactly is celiac disease and how does it affect the body?
So celiac disease is an autoimmune disorder, as you mentioned. The body is essentially attacking itself, and it detects gluten as like a quote-unquote enemy of itself. Okay. And so it creates these antibodies towards gluten, and the tissue that it's attacking when it does that, when it sends its immune response, is all in the small bowel. Mm-hmm. And so the small bowel is where we absorb most of our nutrients from whatever we eat and drink. And when that occurs, when that tissue is damaged, you're unable to do a proper amount of absorption there.
And for anatomy parts, small intestine is right under the stomach, or?
Yes, so goes down from the esophagus to your stomach. At the end of the stomach, the small bowel starts. Where the small bowel ends is where your large bowel or your colon starts.
Okay. And what are the symptoms of this reaction, and how fast are they onset after someone eats gluten?
So the onset can be pretty quick. Everyone's a little bit different, but it can vary. That being said, probably the most common symptom everyone's heard of is to have diarrhea, very loose bowel movements, abdominal cramping, urgency and frequency to use the restroom. But you can have other signs and symptoms as well, including abnormal liver testing, blood tests, infertility, iron deficiency, anemia. Some people will just have dental problems, osteoporosis, arthritis. Those are the main things, but that being said, there's also a lot of vague symptoms that people can have, or they can have no symptoms. And so it makes it a little bit challenging to catch the disease sometimes.
So how do you test for it?
So the most common testing to do, the least invasive testing to do is a blood test. And that blood test checks for the antibodies that the body creates against the gluten, essentially. If that test is positive or negative, kind of leads us down some other pathways. But what's considered the gold standard test is to do an upper endoscopy, where with the camera we look from the mouth down all the way into the small bowel, where we can actually visualize the tissue of the small bowel, see if any damage is occurring, and take a couple of little biopsies, which the pathologist will then look at under a microscope and tell us what's happening there.
So when you have these I'll say stomach pains that are, I mean, are we talking about intense pain, or is this like it feels like a stomach virus, or is it different from person to person?
It definitely varies. Again, some people come in and they just feel a little bit off. So we kind of have to slowly work up kind of what's happening there. Some people come in with just terrible pain, terrible cramping, that sometimes resolves after a bowel movement, sometimes doesn't. So it does vary pretty widely.
And is this something that a primary care physician, I don't know if this is something that makes me go, I got to call a gastroenterologist because I think I have celiac. How do you make that jump from, it could just be a stomach ache to might be celiac disease?
So the primary care physician will kind of do their own workup, and plenty of them do at the very least the blood work for celiac, which is very helpful for us. But then at some point, typically, there's a couple of question marks that are left, and they tend to defer and send the patient for consultation to the gastroenterologist.
And so someone comes to you who's been referred by, say, a primary care doctor for suspicion of celiac disease. What is that initial exam like?
So initially, typical history taking. We want to find out, does anyone else in your family have celiac disease? Do you have any other autoimmune diseases potentially? because those things put you at a higher risk for having celiac. And then physical exam, we're going to get the blood work to start off with. If someone has alarming signs, such as bleeding or unintentional weight loss or difficulty swallowing, something going on that makes me a little more concerned, we'd probably offer endoscopy a little bit sooner to those patients as well.
So once you confirm a diagnosis of celiac or gluten intolerance, how do you treat it?
So the treatment is still to recommend a strict gluten-free diet. And so we typically recommend speaking to a skilled dietitian about that, because they can help you figure out what to avoid, how to avoid it, and still what kind of foods you can have to enjoy your diet, essentially. You also want to replete or give back those vitamins and nutrients that they may have been deficient in coming in to see you in the first place.
So celiac disease is not something that you can cure, it's not something that medicine can cover?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
You have to take that whatever the body sees as the enemy, which is the gluten, out of the equation. And so if that's not there, the body won't mount any type of response to it.
And as we mentioned earlier, and we talked about it, it is an autoimmune disease, and it can actually cause additional serious other conditions. What are some of the other conditions that, if left untreated?
Right, so some of the ones we mentioned were, for instance, the infertility, iron deficiency, anemia. But I think one main thing to kind of keep in mind is if you have one autoimmune disease, it's going to predispose you potentially to be at a higher risk for other autoimmune diseases, such as inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, eosinophilic esophagitis. One major thing to remember as well with celiac is that it does also, unfortunately, put you at a higher risk for lymphoma and other gastrointestinal cancers.
We also mentioned that about 30% of the population, which is relatively low, is properly diagnosed. What's your thoughts on that? Why is that?
So it's probably because there isn't really like a screening program for celiac disease, and because so many people have vague symptoms that maybe they don't get tested. The ones who come in with true symptoms that we can typically associate to celiac will definitely test for. However, there's also this emerging gray area of non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which kind of carries the same type of symptoms, but you don't have true celiac disease. So it's probably a mixture of both, a little bit of under-testing as well as having this blend of patients who are symptomatic but not necessarily testing positive because they probably don't have actual celiac disease.
I mean, with 30% of the population only being tested positively, if you wouldn't mind, we want to do like a quick lightning round of some questions around celiac disease. Is it hereditary?
Yes, it is.
It is hereditary.
It's linked to two genes in the body, and you see it most commonly within the same families, and you're at a much higher risk if someone in your family who's a first or second degree relative has celiac disease.
Is there a higher percentage if it's the mother or the father? I know some diseases that can be that way.
I don't believe so, no.
So in some people with celiac, even ingesting small amounts of gluten, we're talking about like crumbs from like a cutting board or a toaster, it can be enough to trigger a reaction.
Yes, so everyone's different. There's patients who can tolerate more gluten, patients who can tolerate less gluten. That being said, that's why we recommend a strict gluten-free diet. There's trace amounts of gluten even in gluten-free foods, especially if it comes from a processing facility just through cross-contamination. Those trace amounts are typically well tolerated by everyone, though. We don't typically see a response. As long as in their regular diet, they're pretty strict.
I just find it maybe something like as small as a crumb on a cutting board can cause
it's whatever, that small crumb is enough of an antigen for the body to wake up and get that immune response going.
Wow. Can celiac disease develop at any age?
Yes, so classically it was considered a disease of infants who would present with like a failure to thrive type picture. They wouldn't be growing, they wouldn't be healthy. But it can present at essentially any age, and we think it started to present in patients who are older and older because of longer periods of breastfeeding, as well as introducing gluten-containing foods to children at a slightly later age than what we were doing in the past.
The later the stage of diagnosis, is there a greater chance of developing another autoimmune disease?
So technically, yes. And we think that's because of the fact that this inflammation kind of goes untreated for so long that your body is getting used to it. And then you have a blunting of your immune response a little bit in terms of your body can't really distinguish what's an enemy or what's a friend, it has a harder time doing that as these things go on longer, especially untreated.
Mm-hmm. And I know we answered the question that you can have symptoms of celiac disease but not test positive for celiac. If someone has a gluten intolerance but they test negative for celiac, will they eventually test positive for celiac, or can they go throughout life being gluten sensitive but not diagnosed with celiac disease?
Right. I don't think there's one answer to that.
Okay.
Because I'm sure some people will become test positive for celiac, I should say, eventually. But I can't necessarily say that's linked to the fact that they were gluten sensitive prior to that.
Does celiac present differently in infants than it does in older kids or adults?
So yes, so that classic presentation in infants is that failure to thrive type of picture. In adults, it can have that varying range of symptoms from diarrhea to completely asymptomatic.
Is there a connection between celiac and diabetes?
Yes, specifically type 1 diabetes, since they do share some of the same genes.
Wow. As celiac can cause dental and oral health issues.
So celiac disease causes a malabsorption. One of the things you're not absorbing, well, two of the things I should say, calcium and vitamin D. And so with that, you can definitely develop problems with the dental enamel, cavities, gingivitis, oral sores, tongue tingling and numbness, burning sensations. So it does definitely affect the oral cavity.
Wow. And then I guess the last question is, we talked a little bit about it before, if someone goes to their primary care, when should they say or make the decision that I need to see a GI because I think this might be me?
I think at least as long as the primary care has done a basic workup, which they definitely will do, whether or not they do the celiac testing, if they kind of hit their limit on therapy or ideas of what they could do, that's kind of the time to refer. Or if there are any alarm signs in terms of that unintentional weight loss or something like that, where you start getting a little bit concerned for more serious things.
Are you seeing a large number of celiac patients on Staten Island, or?
A handful. I would say I'm definitely seeing a decent amount of the gluten-sensitive population.
Oh,
that's
all ages,
non-celiac.
or?
Well, I only see patients 18 and older.
Oh, okay.
But I would say probably that demographic between 20 and 40 I'm seeing a lot of in terms of gluten sensitivity. Again, the handful of celiac patients that I do have are kind of varying in age.
Any particular reason why you think that age group is being affected?
I don't know, honestly. It's interesting.
There's a lot to learn about this.
Yes, I would say the data that's probably going to be emerging in the next 10, 20 years is going to clarify this gray area entity of non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more information on celiac and potentially better ways to treat it.
You'll be at the forefront of it then.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show again.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So, again, I want to thank Dr. Shahnazarian for coming on the show and sharing his expertise on a serious condition that can be controlled if managed successfully. If you'd like to schedule an appointment with Dr. Shahnazarian, please call either of his offices at 718-818-2066 or 718-984-9658. His offices are located in Bull's Head at 2066 Richmond Avenue and in Eltingville at 4434 Amboy Road. When we come back, we'll be joined by RUMC's clinical nutritional manager, who will share foods and diet tips for people with celiac disease and gluten intolerance.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping, maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
We're back on RUMC Vital Signs. In our first segment, we discussed the clinical side of celiac disease. Now we're going to shift and talk about diet for people with the disease and gluten intolerance. We're now joined by Clinical Nutrition Manager Maria Falzone. Maria is a registered dietitian, credentialed by the Commission on Dietetic Registration, and certified dietitian nutritionist in New York State, and an active member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Welcome to the show, Maria.
Thank you for having me.
We talked earlier about how celiac is triggered by gluten, but what exactly is gluten?
Gluten is a protein that is found in grains, especially in wheat, barley, and rye. And also, gluten acts like a binder. It holds ingredients together. For example, when you mix flour with water, gluten is what holds the dough together. It gives structure to the dough. And also, gluten is that stretchy, elastic network in the dough that is desirable for baking. So gluten is what makes baked goods soft and chewy.
So gluten is actually what you see when you're kneading dough and pulling.
Yes, when you're stretching it, that's the gluten that's holding the flour and the water and the ingredients together.
So then I imagine some of the more common foods are bread and other items like that?
Yes. Bread, pasta, cereal, pizza, baked goods. Those are all the obvious items that have gluten in them. But then there are processed foods where you wouldn't think would have gluten in them. For example, processed soup. Soup is a liquid, so you don't think that soup would have gluten. Salad dressings, processed gravy. Beer is made from barley, so beer is high in gluten. Deli meats. Again, not an obvious item. People think of gluten, they think of things made with flour. So
yeah, I never would have. Deli meats is a surprise to me.
Deli meats, frozen dinners that are not labeled gluten-free, those can have gluten in them. And these grab-and-go meals. Today, our society is grab-and-go and eat and run. And those foods, you have to be careful. They may have gluten in them.
Wow. I was saying before the show that I have family members who have celiac disease. And their celiac reaction was being triggered by drinking straws because there was gluten in the plastic of the drinking straws.
That's interesting because I see many of the stainless steel straws that people are buying today, and maybe they're onto something. They ruled it out and decided to buy the stainless steel straws. Yeah.
So with all the things you've mentioned, which is to me about 90% of what we eat, obviously label reading is critical for someone who has a gluten intolerance or celiac disease. So what if someone has this or has been recently diagnosed, what should they be looking for on the labels?
Okay, yeah. Label reading is crucial, especially on the front of the package. You should see the label that says gluten-free or certified gluten-free logo. So on the front of the package, you will usually find that. And if it's not labeled, check the ingredient list. Usually at the bottom of the ingredient list, it will say contains wheat ingredients. Or then you may need to become familiar with the ingredients: wheat, barley, rye, farina, semolina, modified food starch. These are ingredients that contain wheat. But nowadays there are apps that you can download this app and scan the barcode on the product, and it will tell you if it has gluten in it or not. So I find that a very useful tool. There's the GIG app. GIG is an acronym for gluten intolerance group, and FIG, Food is Good app, which they have scanners that you can scan the item to be secure to make sure that the food is gluten-free.
It seems like, again, as someone who has family members that have this, that the food industry is becoming more open to having celiac disease, people consumers who have celiac disease and gluten-free options. Do you see that now? I'm seeing in supermarkets, in some supermarkets there's full aisles of just, it says gluten-free on the side, and everything in the aisle is gluten-free. Is it truly gluten-free, or is it just so small that it qualifies as gluten-free?
Yes, the food companies, restaurants, supermarkets, driven by demand, have expanded their gluten-free line. Yes, the labeling laws are strict. So if it is certified gluten-free, yes, the facility has to have a designated area, a storage area, prep area, special tools, and it has to be certified by the GFCO, the Gluten-Free Certification Organization, in order for the item to be labeled gluten-free. So our label laws are pretty strict.
And this, what was the name of the organization you mentioned?
GFCO, Gluten-Free Certification Organization.
So they're kind of like the overseers for the country and this.
Yes,
Wow.
and they inspect facilities, they inspect restaurants. Without their seal, they assure that you're following proper policies and procedures and safe practices before putting their seal or logo on the item.
I see. So you are a dietitian in a hospital. I imagine you have to have gluten-free options for at any given moment because patients are being admitted every day. What steps do you take in the hospital to avoid cross-contamination, but also what is the information that needs to be gathered? We're saying, okay, patient John in room 3B needs a special diet.
Education, we educate our staff, and every patient that has specialized needs, for example, someone with celiac disease, a manager supervises that tray. We have a special pink dot system where they're called guest reps who deliver the trays. They pink dot the menu, and so we have a double check that the manager checks, or a registered dietitian checks that tray to make sure that everything on there is gluten-free. And we have a designated storage area, designated color-coded utensils, because you don't want to use a knife to spread peanut butter on wheat bread and then use that same knife to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for someone who's gluten-free. So you want to separate tools, prep areas, and also the storage area. But educating staff is primary.
And do you recommend any resource? Well, you mentioned the apps before. There are other resources that you're aware of that people who can turn to for guidance on even recipes?
Yes. Eating Well is a common website. They have wonderful recipes, and they have a gluten-free section, and all their recipes have been tested. So Eating Well also has a 14-day meal plan for someone who's gluten-free. Also, again, the GIG, the Gluten Intolerance Group, has a fantastic website for support groups and list of restaurants that are certified gluten-free. Shopping food lists that are, with gluten-free items, certified gluten-free items on the list. Those just to name a few. And there's this great cookbook that could it be that it's gluten-free? And you can buy that on Amazon. Wonderful tested recipes for someone who likes the hard copy cookbook.
And as a registered nutritionist and dietitian, how do you stay on top of the latest information on gluten-free and celiac?
Yes, we, as registered dietitian, we have to maintain continuing education credits. So we have, we are notified, of, gluten-free seminars or webinars that we attend to obtain credits. And, we are in the, as a registered dietitian, we're on top of every GI disorder. So, in addition, of course, celiac disease, but we have to stay up to date. Also with the supermarket items, every week, the food companies are coming out with new products, so we have to be on top of that as well. And CSPI, the Center of Science, they're known as the Food Police. They're a great wealth of information, and I get that health letter, and it keeps me up to date with every new item that's in the supermarket. You
mentioned the color code that's used in the hospital, and I would think that that's something that if I had a loved one or a family member at home that was gluten intolerant, but the rest of the family is not, that's a good system to have within your own home. Do you have any advice for people who have someone who has a gluten intolerance or celiac disease at home where they may be the only person in the house of, say, 4 or 5?
Yes, I recommend the color coding, designated cookware, designated ladles and knives and cutting boards, even sponges and dish towels. I would recommend that if there's a family, for a family member in your home.
So even the cleaning utensils.
Yes, and washing your hands. I recommend to prepare the gluten-free meal first to prevent contamination of the regular meals that you're going to make later, if it has regular breadcrumbs or any kind of gluten contaminant that can contaminate the gluten-free gluten-free food. So, breadcrumbs. Also, think of a stick of butter. You don't want that person to share a stick of butter, spreading, their gluten-free toast over someone who's eating wheat toast in the family. And also having a separate toaster. You don't want to have that gluten-free bread mix in with the toaster that previously toasted wheat bread.
Wow. It shows you a cross-contamination. I'm still wrapping my head around what Dr. Shahnazarian said earlier about even a crumb on a cutting board can trigger it. That's amazing. I guess my final question, we're right now we're taping here the end of September, but we have the holidays coming up, Halloween, candy, and Thanksgiving, and Hanukkah, and Christmas. Do you have advice as these food-related holidays start to come up, for people who have a gluten intolerance?
Well, I have good news for Halloween. Most of the candy is gluten-free. Okay. My favorite, Skittles, Tootsie Rolls, Mounds, Almond Joy, Smarties, all gluten-free. The ones you have to be careful, Twix, there's a cookie.
Oh, yeah, Twix. Okay.
Kit Kats, the wafers in there. And any kind of cookies and cream chocolate. Like Hershey's plain chocolate is fine and it's labeled gluten-free, but they're cookies and cream or any kind of, once we start blending things, that's when the person with celiac disease or gluten intolerance has to be careful with reading labels.
Okay.
But Halloween's safe. Thanksgiving, the turkey is naturally gluten-free. We should be cooking the turkey without the stuffing. It's safer. It's lower risk for salmonella, so we should not be cooking the turkey in the oven with the stuffing, so it should be on the side. And you can substitute gluten-free breadcrumbs or rice in the stuffing. And vegetables are gluten-free, and potatoes are gluten-free. It's what we do to them that in preparation we could be adding the gluten. Hanukkah, potato pancakes. We could. Potatoes are gluten-free. You shred the potatoes, and onions are gluten-free, and eggs are gluten-free. You just have to be careful with the flour. I recommend gluten-free flour. They have gluten-free all-purpose flour, or you could use rice flour. So you don't have to sacrifice the Hanukkah traditional food. The jelly donuts, the jelly is gluten-free. Just use the all-purpose flour. Brisket is naturally gluten-free. So Hanukkah is okay too. Christmas, again, the turkey is gluten-free, the prime rib is gluten-free, the ham is gluten-free. Just be careful with the with the breadcrumbs and the wheat products. The vegetables, the sides, they're originally gluten-free. We have to be mindful with the with the gluten-free breadcrumbs, and I say at the holidays, skip the bread. There's so much food, skip the bread. So. But someone with celiac disease has to be careful. If they go to someone's house, please communicate with the host. Let them know that you need to follow a gluten-free diet, and maybe bring a gluten-free dish so you're positive that you're definitely eating something. Because you don't, even things are gluten-free, you have to worry about the practices they use in the kitchen. Even though they made something gluten-free for you, was the cutting board sanitized before they made that gluten-free product? So talking about cutting boards, and I recommend stainless steel cutting boards, because wood you have to be careful. You have to be careful with. And that brings me back to the straws. Stainless steel straws and stainless steel cutting boards, all safer, especially to prevent cross-contamination.
So it sounds like whether you have a gluten intolerance or not, there are plenty of options for the coming holidays, which is good to hear, especially Halloween.
Yes.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Alex.
Fantastic. Richmond University Medical Center has cared for Staten Island and the New York City metropolitan area for over 120 years. You can help ensure that care continues by making a financial contribution to the hospital. Donations can be made in your name, the name of a loved one, or to honor a special nurse or doctor at Richmond University Medical Center. To donate, visit our website at rumcsi.org and click on the Donate button located at the top of the homepage. Or you can call 718-818-2106. That just about does it for this episode of RUMC Vital Signs. Thanks for joining us. I'm Alex Lutz.